today. Okay, so well, today we're picking up with the anthropological and the ontological arguments. I want to do them both today instead of separating them like I had originally planned, because in tomorrow's class, which is Tuesday, I want to, in the next chronological class in this course, which is Tuesday, I want to play part of a videotape for you, which is a debate between Norman Geisler, then professor at Dallas Theological Seminary, with Paul Kurtz, a humanist, editor of one of the humanist magazines in the United States. And it's a head-to-head confrontation on the existence of God, and all this stuff that we're discussing comes up. And it's a very lively and very challenging thing, and it would be a good way to cement some of the importance of this in your minds. So we'll watch that in next class. So, quickly review. What is basically the cosmological, naturalistic, theistic argument?
Where?
Alright, you've got about 4 bolts and 2 nuts in that answer. Let's try to put them together into something that relates to one another. State the cosmological argument. Well, you don't have to memorize nothing, just I want you to explain it to me reasonably. If you can't explain it, no way you're ever going to be able to use it. What is the cosmological argument? Brian?
Nothing's gonna
No, that's not it. That's one of the premises that underlie all of these.
God exists in the first working.
No, that's not it.
There is an effect. And there
fact that we do have the effect, of course, it's first cause.
Well, I give you half for that. You basically related effect back to cause, but you haven't given enough particulars that identify the cosmological argument. Like, what does the cosmos have to do with
I
this?
said, well, we see the force.
All right, but you can derive more specific conclusions about the cause from the nature of the universe than what you said, not just that it exists. Of course, you might as well get as much out of this as you can. Like, if you're going to make an argument, get as much mileage out of your argument as you can, and there's more to it than just arguing back that God exists.
God exists in power to manifest creation.
Okay, let me state the cosmological argument for you.
One more try.
Sure. So we're going to put you on hold, Ken. When he gets ready to talk, I'll turn it back on. Well, while we're waiting for the cosmological argument to materialize, the other one is called the Teleol argument. The third one is the Anthropological argument. The last one is the Ontological argument. The first 3 are of one class because they all use a posteriori reasoning. Whereas the ontological argument is a priori reasoning. Right? Posterior is back, and so a posteriori reasoning is reasoning backwards from it's no big beans, no. It's a very weak argument. But you need to understand the issue involved. Okay, the cosmological argument. Let's get it over with.
Manifestation of effect in natural order.
We'll slow down and make it louder so it'll come out on tape.
Yeah, that's right. Manifestation of effect in natural order, structure, form, and presentation denotes first cause and design in a divine source wherein we can see the valid conceptual origin for effect other than first cause.
Okay, so you basically said the same thing in so many words. The cosmological argument is that the greatness of the universe requires that something greater pre-existed it and caused it based on the assumption that every effect must have an adequate and real cause. Right? So this part here, the last part of this definition or statement, is basically explaining our reasoning, our a posteriori reasoning, right? We are saying that every effect must have an adequate and real cause. But the argument itself is that the greatness of the universe requires that something greater pre-existed it and caused it. It's not just the fact that the universe argues that something exists, which is what you said both times.
Identify first cause as God, though.
You can't. It doesn't. Okay.
That's Schaeffer's approach.
That's fine. I'm not arguing with that. The existence of God, right? Yes. Anybody that believes the cosmological argument believes that the cause is God, right? But the cosmological argument stresses not only God's existence but His power. Romans chapter 1. That which may be known of God, not only that He is, but that His power and Godhead. All right. Paul stresses His power.
But you can't separate the two.
Well,
You can't separate something less and make something greater than it is. Absolutely.
all we're doing is identifying something in particular terms.
Well, I said first cause for divine source. Divine. Not sure if you saw that. I'm just trying to get this in my own mind. I see that you're focused on things.
Well, if all was at stake was something the size of this room, okay, all you could assume then, or all you could conclude using a room argument, is that there had to have been something bigger than this room to make this room. Well, that's not very big. But if you're talking about a universe, you're talking about something powerful. See, and that's the main point of the cosmological argument, is that it pre-existed and that it's greater, powerful. Very powerful. Infinitely powerful. Right? Because of the nature of the universe. It's a great thing.
You have to have it referred here into faith, just to let every fact come into the cause, question just power.
No, you could leave that out as far as a statement of it, but to clarify it in your own thinking. Like if you do that, then so In the most simplest of terms, the cosmological argument is that the vastness of the universe requires that something infinitely greater pre-existed it and brought it into being. All right? Based on that kind of reasoning. Okay, the teleological argument. Let's refine it a little bit. Use that for a basis and
Same thing. Except that they go on a little bit further, saying that the intelligence and the purpose.
okay, the teleological argument doesn't stress greatness so much as it stresses design and intricacy and the complementary nature of diverse parts. Right? The harmony and design and intricacy of the various parts of the universe. That's the way I would put it. Okay? The harmony of the harmony and obvious design of the myriad of intricate systems of the universe. This is what you want to emphasize of the universe. The harmony and obvious design of the myriad of intricate systems.
Okay, what do you got here then? The suggestions and confirmation.
Okay, he's talking about how things you have all different kinds of independent things that work in harmony together. That is, what are these two words?
Adjustment.
Adjustment. They adjust themselves. They have been adjusted by a designer to complement one another.
Confirmation and what
Yeah. Right.
What they intention and what you kind of know.
Right. But for our on street level speaking, the harmony and obvious design of all kinds of intricate systems in the universe argue or require that something infinitely wise or intelligent caused it, based on the same kind of reason, right? Based on that's the teleological argument. You understand the difference between the cosmological and teleological? Same kind of reasoning. You're still going from the universe back to the first cause, but the cosmos argument simply looks at the greatness of the cosmos. The teleos looks at the design and infinite harmony, the interrelationships in the cosmos.
What's that word you got? The design of that
Myriad of intricate systems.
area.
All kinds, if you want. Millions of intricate systems. Okay, so what you end up with, if you use this argument, is a great first cause. What you end up using the teleological argument is an intelligent first cause. Right? That has purpose. Right? And then if you refine it even further, the anthropological argument is, somebody tell me, state it.
So you can identify the cause by the characteristics what it's doing.
Okay, so get specific. What about man must the first cause have.
See personality.
Okay, personality, and even more than just personality. What do you mean by personality? We've already talked about intellect. That's part of
spiritual.
Okay, moral qualities. Well,
Are you putting like intelligence and
physical
power?
is very debatable.
I
There's
realize
not,
in the sense of seeing, feeling, hearing, that's what senses.
so right, modes of personal expression.
Intelligence and power, would that be under moral type thing?
Well, okay, yes, the teleological argument is only possible if you have a first cause that is personal, right? And the personality of the first cause is identified in the anthropological argument. Personality and morality and everything immaterial about man comes under here. Okay. Question.
I spent, well doing the notes, I read it over, and I sat down and I started thinking that I was understanding it. But the more I sit and talk here, I realized that I'm not seeing it.
Well, we'll go through the notes.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to try to start out with this little summary.
No, it's good.
This will help.
It just shows me that I'm not.
Okay, well, let's put it in a statement instead of point. Okay? All right, so the statement that I would make is that man's immaterial qualities, such as personality, moral consciousness, spirituality, feelings, although that's sort of duplicating personality, etc. Maybe it would be best to say all of man's immaterial qualities, such as these things, require that the first cause of the universe obviously designed for man, that the first cause of the universe be a person with the same or better qualities to an infinitely greater degree. See if that makes sense. The anthropological argument is that all of man's immaterial qualities, such as personality, moral consciousness, spirituality, etc., require that the first cause of the universe be a person. You could say that his first cause, if you wish. That man's first cause be a person with the same or better qualities to an infinitely greater degree. Of course, it's based on the same reason. We are looking at what people are like, and we say, well, if you follow the same reasoning that for every cause there must be an opposite and equal, adequate, real effect, or I should have gone backwards. For every effect, there is an opposite, an adequate, and real first cause. And since man is part of his universe, and man himself demonstrates, for example, is a wonderful illustration of a myriad of intricate, interrelated, harmonious systems showing design, that obviously man is part of the effect. And therefore the cause must not just exist and be powerful and be intelligent, but he actually must be personal and moral and spiritual. Now if you understand those, you can forget about the ontological argument. Except in this course you have to know it. But I mean, these are the meaningful ones. This is the meat of it. Now let's take a few moments and go through what Schaeffer said on the anthropological argument. This may clear up some of your questions. The first thing he said about it was that the anthropological argument traces the philosophical and moral features in man back to God. That's a basic statement of it. It traces the philosophical and moral features in man back to God. And it's really an extension of the teleological argument. You understand that? You see how that the anthropological argument is really an extension of the teleological argument. Yet the teleological argument argues that the first cause be intelligent. Well, matter is not intelligent. There is no intelligence in trees, and in dirt, and in water, and in fire. There's no evidence of any intelligence, right? In spite of the fact that the Bible talks about the trees clapping their hands and all that. But that's personification. That's literature. But in reality, okay, matter does not possess intellect or intelligence. The only thing that does in the universe is animate creatures, right? Man and animals, right? And even animals have a lower form, right? Only man possesses true intellect and personality. And so the anthropological argument is simply refining further what the intelligence is. It's a person with moral and spiritual capacities. Right? One of the first things that Schaeffer said under this heading is that this argument is restricted to man, to what man is like. He said it's sometimes called the philosophical or moral argument. And he gave you a definition of what this anthropological argument is. He said, quote, the innate properties of man. This is even simpler than what I put down. The innate properties of man must be possessed by his creator. That's basically it. Whatever we have, God must have. Okay? And he says further that this reasoning leads to a personal and intelligent first cause. Personal and intelligent first cause. And he added several other words like also holy and just and good and true. All of those are immaterial things. Love. Can you weigh love? No, it's immaterial. Justice. Holiness. They're character qualities that have to do with a person's spiritual nature. Right? Does everyone understand what we're talking about here? Immaterial qualities. It's real, nevertheless. Okay, you can't see it, but it's real. Now, just reverse this argument. And this is part of what he does in the chapter. He says that the immaterial part of man, apart from the recognition of the first cause, is an insuperable problem. Atheists and agnostics and evolutionists do not have, they simply do not have a reasonable and adequate explanation for why you are different than dirt. I was reading in one of those books written by a Soviet pastor. It was either Popov or Wurmbrand, one of those two guys. And he was telling an experience that he had in Romania or Russia. I forget where it took place. But he was the book was about Christians being persecuted. And in a factory meeting where they were getting their regular dose of indoctrination, one of the guys in the place that was a Christian, or maybe was at least a skeptic against communism, if he wasn't a Christian, he broke ranks in the room. He walked up to this guy that was feeding them all this dogma about man is really just nothing that matter and that we're all cogs in the machine. And he picked up a chair and slammed it on the floor up at the podium. And then he stopped, didn't say anything. Then he walked up to the speaker and went kapow and punched him. And the speaker got mad. And the chair stayed on the floor. And then he turned around to his colleagues and he said, if we are nothing more than matter, then how come he got mad? Like you can't explain emotion if we're just matter. And that's part of man's immaterial nature. I remember that sticks out in my mind because that guy had it down. He saw the contradiction to evolutionary atheism, that claims that man is simply matter and that matter is eternal. That doesn't explain the origins of man's immaterial nature. Only this does. You were going to say something?
Yeah, you're going to get for you.
I don't know.
I find when you're witnessing, I was just kind of feel that thought. I've been looking at, well, why does God allow things to happen? You automatically realize that I'm doing the fact that there's something personal over it. They want something. That's just
most agnostics, I would say every agnostic or atheist or evolutionist is basically confused and inconsistent. Right? They have to be. They believe that the matter part, wasn't created, but they have no explanation for the other part. The material and the immaterial nature of man. What they basically usually do is just deny man's immaterial nature and relegate it to a hive off from, say, the medieval ages or our environment, that we picked it up from the things around us. But the problem with that is, the big question with this is, fine, I'll agree that a lot of the things that I believe and that a lot of my immaterial qualities rub off from my environment, but you still don't explain with your theory where the first guy got his. See? Like, where did the first moral man get his morality? They have no explanation for that. How does dirt turn into morality? Okay? That's turning the argument around against these people that don't believe in theism. Okay? Very important. Understand that. Another statement of basically what he did is gave you several statements of the anthropological argument, just in different words. The immaterial parts of man, such as life, intellect, sensibility, will, conscience, inherent belief in God, and intelligence, all demand an adequate first cause of greater description than merely blind force. Blind force, which is the posited explanation for origins in on the atheist side. Blind force is not capable of bringing conscience into existence. Another statement, turning it around on the atheist, he said it's inconsistent that in a merely natural process that man suddenly exerts authority and will. Did you get that? It's inconsistent in a merely natural process for man suddenly to exert authority and will over his own causes, because those causes never gave him that. Like, where did he get it? That is totally inconsistent. Right? Another way of saying the same thing. He just said it over and over. Material and unconscious forces, that is nature, the things in nature, are insufficient to act as causes for man's moral character. It's such a blatant fact that it needs restated until a person understands this. The only cause capable of affecting man as such is a personality-possessing cause. The only cause capable of bringing about man as he is a personality-possessing cause. That's the essence of the anthropological argument. Now, the only cause are insufficient to act as causes for man's moral character. And the other side of the argument, Blair, is that the only cause capable of bringing about a man is a personality-possessing cause. Now, if you can understand that statement, you got it. That's the anthropological argument. First cause has to be possessed with a personality. Only a man can bring a man into existence, right? Like a puppet couldn't bring another puppet into existence, because the puppet possesses no personality. It can't design, it can't purpose, it can't plan, it can't think, right? So much less matter operating with a chance mechanism, much less matter itself bringing into existence something as highly exalted and infinitely marvelous as the human mind and psyche.
Their aspect was true, and they had the ideas, and why didn't monkey take pregnant?
Right. They say that you are the monkey, right? But they've made a pretty large leap in logic there. All right. Let's leave the anthropological argument and talk a little bit about the ontological argument. Next class, by the way, I want to see your notes on the naturalistic theistic arguments. Next class. I'll let you have a chance to rewrite them so I can read them. Ontological argument.
Add to them.
Where does this, does anybody know where this name comes from? Did he explain that in the book?
Yeah.
Ah.
Philosophical theory of reality, adoption, category, universal necessity, character,
Okay, so he talked about being and existence and reality, and all of those have to do with the Greek word that is translated being. Is this, are you watching? Whoops.
ontos.
Interesting.
It's the participial form of the verb eimi, which means to be. So this is the participial form of the verb to be. It's translated being. You take off the sigma and you have your prefix, which goes on onto and logical. So you have the logic of being.
All right. There's where the name came from. It'll be your logic. Okay.
Right? And being has to do with existence and reality, right? So that's where they get their terms to make up that one weird and wonderful definition.
All right. Yes, there's your definition, the one that Blair read. That's the one you ought to write down. The science or systematic discussion of real being. That is, where did we come from? The philosophical theory of reality. What exists? What is real as opposed to unreal? The doctrine of the categories or universal. Is it of or universal and necessary characteristics of all existence? Now we said before, because he said it, that the ontological argument is different from the others. It's an a priori argument. Now if you get this concept down, it'll help you understand the nature of the argument. What is a priori? Yeah, you're going from the first, the prior, to the final step. So you're going from front to back instead of back to front. So we know that cause precedes effect in everything else in life. So cause is the prior thing. So you're arguing from the cause back to the effect. Now this is why it's a weird and wonderful theory, an argument, because it's weak as all get out. Because nobody's seen the cause in the first place. I mean, that's the whole point. It's almost like circular reasoning. I believe that God exists because I believe that He exists. That's basically it.
That's it. Write that down.
I believe that there's a first cause simply because I believe that there's a first cause. The fact that I believe in the first place.
So you guys do the same thing. You guys do that.
It's like the monkey that's sitting on the edge of his fence like this, and he says, I think, therefore I am. I saw there's a neat, you can buy those calendars with animal pictures on them, and that was one of the ones that I had. I got it stored downstairs. I should have brought it today. I think this monkey sitting there with his hand on his chin, like the classic masculine pose of man, I think, therefore I am. Right? Yes, the course of reasoning is that you reason from God as a cause to the effect. That's a private joke, Ken. The ontological argument is based very strongly on the concept that man has an idea in his head of God. The very idea of God is common to men. Right? It's related to the doctrine of idealism. The ontological argument argues that reality or substance exists where the mind recognizes it to exist. Right. In other words, if you really believe in Martians, if people seriously believed in Martians, if there were enough people around that actually believed, they had a gut level belief that there were Martians, that in itself would be some kind of weak evidence that maybe there are Martians. Right? And that's part of the idea of being. When we get next into the next thing we're going to discuss in this course are the anti-theistic theories, and one of those is idealism and realism. A system of reflective thinking, interpreting the universe as the progressive evolution of an ideal. That is, nothing exists except in the thought or the impression of the mind. It's the opposite to realism. Realism is the doctrine that the objects of human cognition have real existence. And so the ontological argument is based on realism. That is, the things that you think about in your mind are real things. Are real things. Idealism says that something is real just because you think about it. Idealism defines real in terms of just conceptualization. But realism defines real as something that is actually there and you do think about it.
Well, you can run into a chair in the dark room, and that's where you find it.
Okay, and we'll talk about those later. There are two involved elements that relate to ontology. The idea of a perfect being as a necessary idea of reason. I mean, see, the weakness with the a priori ontological argument is that it presumes something happening beforehand. Right? I think. Maybe I've got it wrong, but if I was to go to the center of Africa and find a guy that had never had contact with anybody except his own people, right? He would probably have a belief in God. And that's the point. The fact that the mind has universally a belief in God, that very concept must have been implanted in him by his creator. And so you're going from the creator back to the effect. You assume that the creator put the idea in the man's mind. Every man's mind. See? The existence of the idea of God. That's the ontological effect.
Also, the common source.
No. See, we're
I realize that you're fortunate, but
I guess you're saying it's impossible to, it's impossible to separate the two. Like we as Christians believe that every human being is related in some line of human history back to Adam. Nobody came from any other source, right? And so yes, the concept of tradition possibly is passed down. Christian missionaries found this. There's a book, Eternity in Your Hearts by Don Richardson, and this one here, in which he describes cultures that no Christians have ever had contact with, and they walk into this place and they find out that they believe that God is His Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Not in those terms, but that God is a Trinity. Or they believe that God has a book that He once revealed and we lost. Or that God sent His Son and His Son died for people. You know, and they've actually come to heathen cultures that had these concepts in their cultures. Where did they get them? It had to have come from the apostles or further back, you know. Yeah, like Melchizedek. He starts out the book talking about Melchizedek. He was a priest of the Most High God. Where did he come from? I don't know. He wasn't related to Abraham. See? So where did he get his knowledge? He must have got it through maybe Noah or one of those early patriarchs, you know. And this is sort of related to the ontological argument. Okay. All right, we just want to spend a few minutes trying to wrap up the religious developments in the intertestamental period and move into some of the social. So the religious expectations next. Let's just briefly touch on them, and I've summarized them on the board. There are three basic things to remember about what happened in the mind of
the average Jewish person during the period between the Old and New Testament. When the Jews went into exile with the Babylonians, it was because they were idolatrous. And when they came back from exile, they've never had a problem with idolatry. As we studied in the major and the minor prophets, last semester, the 70 years in exile cured them of idolatry. It seemed like they were always into idolatry, always before that. When they came out of Egypt under Moses, they fell into idolatry. When they went into the land under Joshua and through the period of the Judges, terrible idolatry. Under Solomon even, they were into idolatry. And all through until the 10 tribes were taken to the north, from the north, and the kingdoms fell, the southern kingdom fell, the big problem was idolatry. And when they came back, and ever since, the Jews, whatever you can say about them, even today, Judaism's primary belief is there is one God, and his name is Jehovah. Right? Monotheistic. So, that was maintained during the 400 silent years. At first, when the people came back from exile, they sought to keep the faith and the law. They were zealous for it under Ezra and Zerubbabel, and the prophets came and they pumped them up and they challenged them, and there was a real zeal. This zeal became misplaced because it became law-oriented rather than faith-oriented. And Paul refers to that in Romans chapter 9, at the end of the chapter. He says that the Gentiles have attained to righteousness because they sought it by faith, but the Jews didn't attain unto righteousness because they attained unto the law. They were trying to keep the law. They missed the whole point. Right? So Paul put his finger right on the sore spot that characterized Jewish attitudes from the end of the Old Testament. Literalistic, just looking at what the words actually said, only concerned about the laws and not the spirit of the laws and not the message of the Old Testament, the promises and the covenants besides Moses' covenant. Nothing to. They were concerned about what they look like and not their hearts. Now we move from the religious developments in the intertestament period to a brief survey of social conditions. In Palestine, as a result of the 400 silent years. We've already touched on some of these, and we've only got 5 minutes, so we're going to race. What was the Jewish world like socially? Well, mixed up. Mixed up nationally or nationality-wise. And purity-wise. I don't know if there's a better way to distinguish that. What I mean by mixed nationality is that the land of Palestine was overrun by Romans. It was overrun by Greeks. It was overrun by Jews. It was just overrun. Right? And related to that question is, and by the way, that's a result of something that we talked about earlier, because of the political and military developments that took place between the Old Testament and the New Testament,
As a result of the policies, governmental policies, divide and conquer, that every famous world power used, right? And the resettlement policies, you naturally have colonies of Jews all over Asia, and you've got people from other lands brought into Palestine, right? So that's why the mix, right? Now, the purity part is particularly important in terms of Samaritans. Samaritans versus Jew relationship, an example of this is John 4. Remember when Jesus talked to the woman at the well? She thought it was strange that this man was a Jew and that he was speaking to her, because he was in Samaritan country. And I don't have a map. We should have had a map tonight, but here goes. That's a really bad map. Right? This is Galilee. This is Judea. Jerusalem is on the border of Judea and Samaria. And Samaria was one of the subdivisions of the Roman province of Palestine. And it was named for the city of Samaria, right here smack dab in the middle of this section. And there were two different ways to go from Jerusalem, which is the center of all worship in the country for Jews, and Jesus' hometown up here in Nazareth in Galilee. Two ways to get there. He could take the trade route from Egypt that ran through Samaria towards Phoenicia and Syria, or he could take the other route that came from Midian up this side of the Gulf of Aqaba, the east of the Dead Sea, and would come up to Damascus this way. He could either take the route this way, which all pious Jews did to avoid the Samaritans, then cut back over to go home, or he could simply take the short and direct route and go through forbidden territory. Does it make sense? Well, why? Well, why was this rival between the hated and despised Samaritans from a Jewish perspective?
They were Catholic.
Yeah, they were racially impure. Why were they racially impure? Where did they come from? Yep. Assyria captivated the 10 northern tribes, and the 10 northern tribes lived there. Sorry. In 721 BC, because of their sin, God judged the 10 northern tribes and sent them into Assyria. Right? And the Syrians later sent some Jews back. The Jews that came back were idolatrous, they were ungodly, and they simply married the indigenous peoples that the Assyrians had put in there, just like the Romans. They mixed the peoples up when they conquered the different countries. And so the returned Jews that were there, that came back after the Assyrian conquest, they intermarried Gentiles, right? And to the Jews down here in the southern tribe, that was taboo. And ever since, they had nothing to do with one another. However, about the time of Jewish independence, after 63 BC, there was a specific cause for hatred between the Jews and the Samaritans, and that is that there's two mountains. Let me redraw my map here. There are two mountains. There's a mountain range that runs down the center of the land of Palestine, right? And Jerusalem is built on top of a mountain, and there are two mountains over here where Jesus sat at the bottom of between them at Jacob's well,
in a place called Sychar, in John chapter 4. He was talking to this woman. And this is in Samaria. One is called Mount Ebal, and one is called Mount Gerizim. And what is the mountain called that Jerusalem was built on, or the temple in Jerusalem was situated on?
Yeah.
Mount Zion, all right. And in the Old Testament, there was Mount Moriah. Moriah, or Zion, okay. Either name would be fine. Now, the Jews believed that this was the place to worship, because God said, in Zion I will put my temple. And in Zion, right? The Samaritans, in the Maccabean period, and Baxter alludes to it, they, about that time, just a few years before Christ was born, they established a rival temple on Mount Gerizim, and they went so far as to go back to the book of Genesis and to scratch out a couple of words, and they wrote in Gerizim, in the story of Abraham, where Abraham offered up Isaac on Mount Moriah. They scratched out Moriah and put Gerizim in there. So they corrupted their own Bible to do it. It's no different than what the Jehovah's Witnesses and what the Mormons are doing today. Same thing. They changed the text to establish their own religion. And so the Samaritans then represented a corrupted text and a corrupted religion and a corrupted